you kind of lost me at data transfer. I don't know what's going on here.
FTP, file transfer protocol.
Now, what we have to remember is that not every position can be changed to every other position.
And making sure that the users we have now stay happy and stay on while trying to attract some other people to play it.
They make my
home, but yeah. No, that's over in a heartbeat. Ain't got any problem with that.
Oh, man, I don't know why, but those things crack me up. Some of the best of last season. Welcome to This, That, and the Other. This is season 4, and I think this is like episode 13 or something like that. Anyway, I think it is 13. Anyway, I hope to have a couple guys pop in on the show tonight as guests and chat with them about a variety of things. But in the meantime, if they show up, great. If not, we'll just talk about a little recruiting. So I'll go ahead and get started with that. By the way, I'm your host, Magic, and as I mentioned, this is This, That, and the Other, commonly referred to as TTATO. And anybody who wants to join can simply click the link on the GD forums in the pinned TTATO thread. That particular link is in the first post of that thread, and it says Enter Broadcast Studio within that post. And when the link is valid or active, then of course it will be blue. Those links are only good for one specific show. So each airing will have a unique link, and it'll be attached to that particular verbiage, Inner Broadcast Studio, on that first post of the pinned thread. No special software required. Just click it, and you'll be taken to the waiting area, as they call it. Simply enter your name, whatever name you want to be referred to, or the show up on the screen for the show, and we'll get you on as soon as possible. I'll get notified that you're there. So no need to contact me or anything of that nature. Just click, enter your name, and get ready to be on the show. So, and that's open for anybody, anytime, no special invite needed. Like I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about recruiting. Now, granted, we've talked about recruiting probably dozens of times, if not more, throughout the course of the show. And one of the things that some people find annoying, some of the veterans, are when the new folks ask questions that the veterans have answered for other people dozens of times. So I always encourage the new guys and gals to read the forums. Go ahead and scour through those forums and go back more than just, a month or 2 months or what's on that first page. Go back a couple months. And you can also use the advanced search where you can enter a particular word, and it'll find all the posts that have that particular word inside that post. So that'll help you out as well. But for me, I really don't mind, providing an answer, even if I've answered that question a couple of times. It's all about learning, and you have to appreciate that these are the first go around for some of these folks. And we want them as a community to be able to get the hang of things as quickly as possible in order to enjoy the game eventually up to the level that the majority of us do enjoy it. It gets to be complex once you leave Division III. It can be quite laborious if you're wanting to be successful at it and you want a good shot at winning some NCs or potentially winning a national championship. You got to put your work in. Now, there are a few guys out there who seem to have that magic formula, and they can probably just wake up and win a national championship. But for the majority of us blue-collar workers, we got to put some time in to get those rewards. So recruiting is probably one of the more critical aspects of that entire process. Of course, we're talking about game planning and depth chart and playbooks and all that stuff. But recruiting is really where it's at, because quite frankly, and it should go without saying, if you've got a team full of sucky players, your results are going to reflect that. you're not really going to be too successful. Now, the one thing a lot of people kind of get confused about that is when they see a player who's a sim AI and they think, oh my God, this guy sucks. Well, we have to understand what category sim AI that player is. And there are two categories. There are the sim AI who is recruited to a team that is coached by a sim. That's one category. And the other one is a sim AI player that is signed to a team that is human coached. That's a different category. Now, the reason that distinction is important is because if you're a human coached team and you don't sign all your scholarships, your assistant coach will just go out and grab somebody walking on the street and throw them on your team. That's the category 2, as I reference it, type sim player that generally sucks. Every now and then you'll find that rare gem, and there's currently a thread going on the GD forums about finding those few and far between guys that actually end up being pretty good players, even though they're sim signed. But the category 1 guys are usually quality players. Those sims are usually top-notch players because the recruiting that goes on by a sim coach team actually gets no vision restrictions whatsoever. So some of those guys are better than guys that you would see after you took over the team. So don't shy away from a team that's loaded with sim recruits, especially when you're getting started with a team or you're starting your career with a particular team, because some of those guys are going to be quite good, actually. And you'll see that it's not uncommon to see sim teams in the top 25 that have been sim coached for many, many years. So keep in mind that there are two different categories of sim recruits that join your team, and that's important. But as far as recruiting aspect goes, there's a couple things that you need to know about when to send what. When do you send head coach scouts? When do you send ACs? When do you send phone calls? When do you send campus visits? When do you offer scholarships? And all of those things can be daunting for the new person who's come on and trying to, figure out, swim up the creek, so to speak, figure out what he's doing in recruiting. And that's kind of why we're here, to help you figure those things out, kind of give you some various strategies from a variety of people. And Joe, he's been a guest here frequently. He's on with us today. Joe, how you doing? Love that hat, brother.
I'm doing great. I noticed that your A-list crew of guests haven't signed on yet, so I thought the second string could come in here.
There you go. There you go. I haven't got on my skin shirt. Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, well, better be careful. Better be careful. We're going to get canceled here.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, let them try is all I can say. But, Joe, the show today is based around recruiting. And, some of the stuff comes from questions on the forums or things that I get in site mails. And I've always let everybody know that site mails me. I'm not going to reveal your name unless you want me to, unless you want to be known that you asked this particular question or whatever. So I frequently field quite a few questions. And recently I got a question that was multifaceted, basically. It had a couple prongs to it, if you will. And the premise is cycle 1. What do I offer and when? And there's kind of a thread to that on the message on the forums. But I will say that this individual has not posted on that thread. He didn't originate it, and he hadn't posted. He saw the thread and contacted me to get some of my opinions on it. And I've got my take. I've tried different things, and it all depends on where you are, what division, etc. But for the new guy, Joe, whose first foray into this game is at Division III, he's picked up his first team. He's got a pretty good team. He's got 40 wins over 3 years. That team does when he took it over. So he's going to have some pretty good vision at D3. What do you recommend he do at the first cycle if he's trying to fill, he's going to fill 12 recruiting spots throughout the position analysis. He's not hurting at any one, but he's got 12 players to sign. What are you going to tell him to do?
Well, Division III, that I tend to get out of Division III as quickly as I possibly can. Of course, if this is his first season, that means he doesn't have any playoff money.
Right.
And now, if you're right, he has good vision. I mean, usually what I do at Division III is I sign a relatively decent class because I know I'm not going to be there, but I don't want to sully my reputation by running a team into the ground.
Right.
So just basically stay within your 180, maybe 360, and first cycle scout some players. Generally speaking, if you see a player that you think can start for your team immediately, and you're willing to sign this guy no matter what his potential is, throw a couple campus visits. Maybe usually I use campus visits and head coaching visits. Those are the two things I use. But if you know you want the guy right now and you don't care whether he's very low potential or low potential, go ahead and throw in on him right now. Unless you've got somebody real close that you think might go for him too. So
now I could probably do an 8-hour series on recruiting alone and never really get into the weeds of the various nuances because there are so many variables. We're right now, you and I are talking about Division III, and I can name 3 separate scenarios that would call for 3 different recruiting strategies. And just at the high level view would be for the guy who's coming into D3, first time player. He's got a really good vision team, and his goal is to get the hell out of D3 and get to D2. And his team is pretty well balanced, but he's got, like I said, about a 12-man recruiting class, and he's got 2 or 3 places that are weak that he could easily fill with recruits that would be productive right away. So kind of what you alluded to, that's a situation where you really don't care about potential simply because you're not going to be there year 2, 3, 4 for this particular player. It's a 1 year and done. It's kind of the inverse of Kentucky basketball with their players. You know how it used to be. They'd come in for 1 year and then the players would leave. Well, now you're the coach. You're coming in for 1 year and then you're going to leave. So you want to be effective and have success right away. So in this particular scenario, I have recruited specifically to fill those 2 or 3 shortcomings, and the rest of the recruits be damned. If I've got $3,000 per recruit and I've got a 12-man roster or a 12-man team that I'm supposed to pick up for recruits, that's only $36,000. I don't have a lot of money to play around with. So I will go out and, regardless of potential, regardless of work ethic, I'm talking about core players who can be effective now. I have no heartburn signing 3 players and dropping the entire $36,000 on those 3 players and picking up Sims for the rest of them because they weren't going to start no matter who I recruited anyway. They really weren't going to help my roster. I'm looking at guys geared for the win right now, and I'm moving on. So that's one way. Now, you were talking about the guy who wants to kind of balance out his roster, and he may only be there for a year, similar situation, but he's going to recruit an entire 12-man grouping. And again, talk about how the limited money affects your strategy when you are trying to fill those 12 recruit scholarships with decent players.
Well, yeah, I mean, I generally will recruit an entire class. And I do that because I don't like to leave a team in worse condition than I inherited the team.
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm sure, and I'm actually monitoring a team I left last year, won the national championship last year, and I'll hold my comments. I may wind up making a post on this because I think the guy who took over the team is poised to, in one season, destroy it.
Is this Central Arkansas we're talking about?
Yes. 35 scholarships open. And so far he has signed 6 players. So it looks like he's, I don't know, because recruiting, is still ongoing. We've already had the first day of signing and he signed 6 players. He had 35 open scholarships. That's over $200,000. And the best vision you can have with a national champion. And so far he signed 6 players.
And this is Wilkinson, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
I mean, that's fine if that's what you want.
There.
Say again?
I've got the Colorado Mines team there at D2, and they had like 30, I want to say 28, 30 scholarships my first year. And that's a whole different scenario that we won't even go into, that scholarship year.
Yeah. Well, the team is actually set up to do well in the future. It's got 15 players on it. 12 of them have been redshirted, and all 12 of those players are studs. Awesome. So if you recruit 25, 30 good freshmen, you're going to win first year. So we'll see. But that's fine. Everybody has, it's not my team anymore, and whatever. But I like to leave teams in at least a full recruiting class. Recently, I took Brockton, and Islander Bob, something like that, had the team, maybe a couple seasons before me, and it was a stud team that I took over. Mm-hmm. And I know the recruiting class I recruited was not up to his standards, but they're all decent players. So, but as far as the limited budget goes with Division III, you can't go all in on too many players if you intend to fill the whole class. Right. You have to keep some back just in case something happens, so that you can go with second options or whatever. So, and $3,000 per recruit is not a lot.
No, it's not. It truly isn't. And you'll see just how quickly you burn through that money if you let emotions guide your psyche rather than recruiting with your smarts instead of your hearts. As we used to have a coach that play with your smarts, not your hearts. Your hearts will come in later, But anyway, that's one of the things, the strategies that are involved in that. Let's say you're trying to fill a 10, 12-man recruiting class. At D3, it's important to get as many of them green as possible. And one of the ways to do that, especially at D3, is, at the first go-round, look to see where some of those recruits that you would like to have are positioned geographically. And then you can use that recruiting analysis tool that Ed put together for everybody, excuse me, and see how many other human coach teams are in that area. And if you found a void where there's not a lot of human coach teams there, throw a phone call on that guy or several of them in that area. Don't be afraid to, send out, 60, 70 phone calls because a lot of times, especially at D3, a phone call is impactful to that recruit, and he perceives that phone call to be genuine effort from the coach. So there are times when, if you've got a good team, you may throw out 70 phone calls, and out of those 70, you may get 14 or 15 green for you right away without doing anything. And now you've got those guys selected. Wait a cycle or two to see if there's anybody else out there looking at these guys. And there generally will be, but it's important to wait because you don't have the money to battle that some of these other guys have. They've got playoff money. They've got playoff money from previous years that they keep rolling over at that 25%. And, that's why you need to wait. And you'd be surprised how many good players you will find at D3 that are green for you with a simple phone call. And then if you're trying to do a good recruiting opportunity where you're going to be there for a while, now's when you throw that assistant head coach scout, or the assistant preferably over a head coach scout, out to that player or those players that are green for you and see which one of them have the potential that meets your minimum requirement. And that's just one of the easy strategies, the day one type strategies to get a new coach maximum green players day one, day two.
Yes, and also go for undecided players. I mean,
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Undecided. You don't want to do this with players who are red for another school, before recruiting even starts. A phone call is not going to change squat. I'm talking about, and thanks, I should have led with that. I'm talking about undecided players. You want to send those phone calls to the undecided players. And, like I said, if you send 70, I can almost guarantee you 30 of them will be red for another school after one cycle, just because those coaches may be closer and they can afford to drop a scouting visit where you can't because the guy's 1,000 miles from you.
Well, yeah, I think also just first year, focus almost all of your attention on undecided players.
Yes.
At least until you get, if you're trying to get 12 players, at least until you get 12 greens in the positions you need. Now, once you have 12 greens and you still have some money left, I mean, you want to do two things. Number one, you want to upgrade your class, but you want to keep some money back in case you have to defend your class, because people may come in and try to raid your recruits.
That never happened.
Well, that's where the emotion comes in. Okay.
Yes.
That's where you set yourself up.
That's smart, not hard.
Yes. And if somebody flips one of your recruits, don't take it too personally, and find yourself in a recruiting war with somebody who, and you may wind up on the short end of the stick with that. Even if you're on the winning end of a recruiting war, I've had recruiting wars. I remember I was at Houston one year, and the coach at Texas A&M flipped 4 of my recruits, and he did them one right after the other. And as he was flipping the recruits, I was sinking money into each one of those recruits, and the guy literally destroyed my recruiting class.
Yeah.
And for the next 5 seasons, I had a recruiting war with him, where I kind of held my own, but I know if I hadn't had the recruiting war with him, I would have come out ahead. I wouldn't have spent too much money fighting this guy. And it was just kind of one of those things where my emotion got the best of me. And yes, I did wind up flipping a couple of his recruits. But otherwise, if I had avoided him, I would have done much better.
Yeah. And sometimes winning a recruiting battle is a losing cause. And that's kind of what you alluded to, simply because you've drained your funds. So now you may get, and remember, we're talking about staying with the team and being with that program for multiple years. So it's important to get those high potential guys with good work ethic, with the good solid cores that you want. So when you win a recruiting battle, you have socked in so much money in that effort that it prevents you from having funds to go after some of those guys that, you could scout with an AC scout and hit another 10 guys and find some diamonds in the rough and pick them up relatively cheap. And just as for instance, let's say a good quality D3 guy is, his cores balance out at an average of, 45 or 50. That's a good solid D3 type player that you're battling for that one player at 50, but now you have no funds to sign anybody else. And you're taking on a really crappy sim AI assistant coach assigned player that's really not going to help your team now or in the future. Plus, you're probably going to want to cut that guy in the coming seasons, and it's going to hurt you even more because it was under your watch that he got signed. So it's just what did Ronnie Reagan call it? The trickle-down economics. It's, the trickle-down bad effect of poor management when it comes to recruiting. I would rather take a couple 40 guys that are going to be around for a while and, if nothing else, be great backups than have that 150 guy, and it hurt my recruiting class and my coaching reputation as well. Because if you're going to move to D2 eventually, you don't want to have that F in that in that reputation, because you've cut guys every year that your assistant coach signed.
Yeah, I can't relate too much to Division III recruiting. Yeah, of course, I've been at higher levels, but it's the same concept. I mean, there are occasions when you do want to have you do want to stand up to somebody who's raiding your area or whatever.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. But not your first year at D3.
Yes.
When you don't have any money.
Well, yeah, I'm assuming when you say first year at D3, you're talking about probably the person's first year at D3 and also first year in gridiron.
Yes.
I mean, because there is so much to learn in your first year that, I mean, you're learning everything, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's critical, too, at D3, and that's why I wanted to start off with the recruiting aspect, is because a good recruiting class can compensate for a first year's coach mistakes simply because he doesn't know what he's doing with the particular game layout and how to game plan and how to set your playbooks up. If you've got a good class and you've got some studs in that class, just on sheer ability, they may be able to pull you out of some pitfalls and avoid some losses just because you've got a stud running back that can carry the rock 9 out of 10 times to the end zone.
Yeah, I think your video and your audio are off a couple seconds, about a second or two. Seems like you're a little out of sync as far as I can see. And maybe that's just on my end.
I'm getting some of that on the flip side as well. So maybe it's just a lag or something. Hopefully it's not too interruptive for the folks that are watching, but I've noticed it happens here from time to time. So.
One thing, of course, your tutorials are really good for people. I think this is kind of a situation where the rich are going to get richer and the poor are going to get poorer. In other words, usually those who are going to be successful are going to be like S. Cottrell. They're going to do a lot of research. They're going to look through the message boards. They're going to find any videos on YouTube that are going to be, and they're just going to do a lot of research. They're going to watch all your videos. In fact, I'm creating a tutorial myself, which will actually take a couple months. So someone who has the propensity to do a lot of studying will learn much more quickly than somebody who comes on and just kind of wings it. Yeah. And, that's just the nature of this is a very complex game. There are a lot of things that you could do to be successful. And if you do all of them in conjunction, you can be very successful. But for a new player, you're not going to be successful really early unless you do look on the message board and do check YouTube for videos. And maybe possibly site mail a couple people or whatever. You go on the message board and say, "Can you teach me?" or whatever. Yeah, I've seen messages where people say, "I'm looking for a mentor" or whatever. But if you're expecting to come on and just play it and not study and not learn, then you're going to be less successful. Which that's fine. Some people, not everybody can be completely 100% successful or whatever. I think of myself as a pretty good coach. I know there are much better coaches out there than me, and I kind of bank on hoping to get lucky every now and then. So,
that's me. Yeah, that's me. And one thing too that a lot of people don't understand until they've played this game for several years is it is X's and O's. When we come down to the nuts and bolts, it is X's and O's that are in essence ones and zeros. It is nothing but a computer simulation game. So there's aspects of the game that as a person who has coached in the real world don't transfer to this game. They don't necessarily apply. One of those things, of course, is the emotional aspect. The guys you put on the field don't know if they're winning or losing. They don't have any emotional ties to the outcome of the game. They don't know that they're playing a rival. They don't know that the guy you're playing against, the human coach you're playing against, you hate his guts and you want to drag him around the parking lot. They don't know these things. In real life, you know, when we're talking pee-wee or up to semi-pro, whatever, they know these things. And those things can, in fact, have a bearing on the outcome of a game, just like cheerleaders. You know, when I coached pee-wee ball, our cheerleaders, I swear, they counted for at least 5, 6, 7 points a game just because they kept the guys pumped up and the spirits up and the emotions going. And you know, everybody was ready to go. They had their engines revving. And these ones and zeros that don't work like that. It just doesn't. And that's sometimes, you know, the aspect that a lot of guys fall victim to is thinking that, you know, I'm going to put this guy in because he's got 700 yards and he's, you know, 2 games to get 1,000. He's going to work. No, he don't care how many yards he has.
Yeah. But, you know, I think it's, if you understand this is a numbers game, and but I'm not talking about numbers as far as stats.
Right.
I'm talking about numbers as far as each attribute is a number.
Yes.
And you're trying to understand how to project how these numbers are going to translate into the game. And rather than worrying about having
within that game, Joe, you know, the specific situations within the game. Sorry, but I wanted to put that in there too.
Well, yes. You're taking 4 or 5 elements and you're trying to get the right combination, basically. Or you know, and that's even simplistic. You know, roster management, recruiting, playbooks, your depth chart, your opponent's strengths and weaknesses, what they're doing, the unpredictable nature of what they're doing, and you trying to be unpredictable. There are so many things to consider, and some people are really good at this. I prefer to have a team, and I don't have this kind of a team, and I'd like to have this kind of team, but I don't, and I never have had this kind of a team where it doesn't matter what you do, I'm going to roll over you. It doesn't, you know, I'm so good that I'm going to roll over you. And maybe if I ever get Texas or Penn State, maybe I'll be able to pull that off. But I've never had a team where I've been able to do that. Otherwise, I need to figure out what they are doing. And I need to do at least as well as they do on the recruiting trail. And, you know, like I said, hope that I can get lucky every now and then. So,
yeah. And you know, it's like the adage I used when I was talking to another guy is coaching in WhatIfSports GridIron Dynasty is no different than baking a cake. You know, you're going to have a cake. You're going to make the same cake every week. You're going to use the same ingredients. You're going to use the sugar, the flour, the baking soda, whatever. And with this game, you're going to use the playbook, the depth chart, the sub percentage, the game plan, whatever. The difference is when you're baking a cake and you use sugar twice instead of sugar once and baking soda once, you're going to have a different result. And the same is true in this avenue, because if you spend more time on playbook and then you don't game plan correctly, you're going to have an unexpected result, you know. And the problem is, unlike a cake where it's the same quantity every week, the same amount of measurements, the same ingredients, in WhatIfSports, it's not the same thing every week. For instance, you know, I could come up against a team that is just tremendous in their DBs. And I know that no matter what I do, I'm not going to be successful throwing against them. So I have to change up my recipe and focus a little bit more on the playbook to provide me some better running opportunities and potential success there, and incorporate that into the game plan. Whereas the following week, you know, I may have a team who has the worst DBs in society, and I've got a great quarterback, and I know I can throw on these guys all day long. I don't even really need the game plan. I just throw a playbook in there that's nothing but pass, and my success is going to be pretty much guaranteed. So the coach has to be able to be flexible first and foremost. And as a new coach in D3, that is the area where you're limited, is your ability to manipulate and massage your playbook, your game plan. You don't have that flexibility that you will at D2 and above. And that's one of the things that I think turns a lot of coaches away from this game, because they feel like what they see at D3 is what they're going to experience up through D1. And it's just not the case.
Yeah, I think one of the problems that new people have is when they go into D3, I mean, they obviously learn very quickly that they have a limited ceiling short term. And there are some players who play at D3 who have been there for a long time, and they obviously know how to play the game, and they have really good vision, and the quality of players that they recruit are superior to the kind of players that a new player is going to get. Yes. And they have a very short expectation. And if they could just understand that there are people who have been playing this game. I've been playing this game for 5 years, and I'm like a newbie still compared to most of you guys. If they can understand that people have been playing this game for 20 years, obviously they know how to play the game. Okay, so if you want to become really good, you can become really good, in 6 months. But you're going to have to put some serious study and work into it, because these players are good. They've been playing for 20 years. So, like I said, I've been playing for 5 years, and I'm a newbie. I do bring other recruiting games with me. I've played other games, so that helped a little bit. But I still have my ears. I'm listening. When you guys are talking, and I'm just trying to pick one more thing out of your brain. Hopefully you'll slip and say something that you shouldn't be saying out loud. Okay. And then I'll grab it and it'll be mine. So.
I'm an open book. I mean, whatever I do, the community probably knows about, because I've used so many examples and showed my actual game plans and playbooks and stuff that's why I can't win worth the crap, is because everybody out there recognizes I'm mediocre, and nobody's really willing to come forward and say, look, scrap what you're doing because it sucks. Here's what you need to be doing. And, one of the drawbacks, too, for me, I've been on since, I think, 2005, I think, is when I started playing this game, late 2005. And that was one version. And then we went to another version. And now we're on yet a different version. But I think my problem is that I learned the game and I played for several years, and then I went back to school, so I had limited time, and I got away from the game. And when I came back to it, so much had changed dramatically. I mean, it was almost a totally different game, that at that point, I resigned myself to not putting in that effort that you're talking about, not necessarily, doing doing the things that I preach, going back and research, going back and pick guys' brains. There's a couple guys on here who I've chatted with regarding some of my shortcomings and how to improve certain areas and stuff. Sure, but not to the degree that it translates into pretty much continuous success. There's a few guys on there that can take a team and in 2-3 years, boom, he's a national champ. That is not me. And sure, I'd like to have that kind of a squad and ability, but at the same time, I would rather figure it out on my own, because I think it would mean more to me than if somebody gave me their blueprint. But what's holding me back is I don't necessarily have the time to get into all of that, into those weeds to the degree that I would need to. In order to, come up with an improvement of my product so that it translates to the success on the field. I need to. We all do. We can all learn from every game. There's something to learn. But like you said, you've got to really be a student of the game, scour the message boards, and don't be afraid to ask somebody for specific help, not generalities, but specific stuff. And do you have a particular mentor that has really opened the curtain, so to speak, to show you what's behind door number one in some aspects?
Well, it's I would say several people, have posted things in the message board which clicked with me. Of course, we're talking about a 5-year period of time. I would say Chetty gave me some information that kind of revolutionized my understanding of the relationship between the depth chart, the position page, and the playbook. And actually, I think there was recently a post asking where Smokey Bones was or whatever. I think that's his name.
Yeah, Sean.
He created a YouTube video of his playbook, and although I don't use the same offense that he uses, I learned a lot from that. So there have been several individuals and different people post different things at different times, and they fill in little gaps that you don't have.
Right.
I think the main thing is you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. And that's what you can find from some of these videos that you're talking about is there'll be that one nugget that makes you go, well, I never thought about that. So here's something that you didn't know, and now you research it, and now you're a little better off than you were before.
I'll give you an example from one of your videos.
Oh my gosh. How to drink.
You and I guess his name's Sean Cottrell.
Yeah.
We're talking about game planning and how you need to know, if you're going to target one of your opponent's defensive backs, or you need to, or whatever, and I hadn't any real concept of of course, once you mentioned that, I went and I looked and I figured out, well, how can I target, my opponent's weak defensive back with my strong wide receiver?
Yeah, and that's all part of the depth chart and game plan and playbook identification.
Yes. So that was, so you get a little bit here, you get a little bit there, but it's like, for me, a 5-year progression. And for a new person to think that they're going to pick it all up immediately. Now, maybe, someone like Armchair who was on the message board all over the place, and some other guys would come, and they just, they learn 2 or 3 years worth of stuff in 3 or 4 months.
Right.
Because they put the effort in.
Yeah, exactly.
But, I have a job and I have other things that I do, thankfully, to where I can't do, it takes me 5 years to learn. So it may take another 5 years before I become as good as some of these other guys. I don't know.
Well, I'll put everybody on notice. I'm planning to retire here within about the next 5 years. And I'm going to have me plenty of time to figure out this game just in time for them to change it once again. That's going to be what happens. That's why I didn't go back to what I did initially and sink a lot of time into learning the new engine, as it's referred to, because I was like, man, I've done this once. I don't want to do it again,
Yeah, it's really difficult to imagine them improving this game too much more because, number one, the programmers don't understand the coding very well. But at some point, they have to come into the 21st century, and the way to do that is to create a new platform.
And that's kind of what they're doing now, is they're taking the actual guts of this game and moving it into the 21st century by making it more modular. And I think Adam talked about that at one point. Right now, for instance, the way the game is, whatever the computer programming that was used for it, if it's not easy to make a single change, because one little code is referenced in other parts of the game. So if you change that code for this particular aspect, you unknowingly have affected a different part of the game. So what they're trying to do now is modularize, whatever it's called, to where you can go in and the entire game is built on building blocks, and you can change a particular block without it affecting another block. Or you can assign it so that when you change this block, you intentionally affect other parts of the game. And that is so much easier to do. You know, it's more in line with the plug and play aspect. It's so much easier to do. And I think Adam actually said one time, you know, he said it's the difference between cooking a meal on a stove from scratch and throwing something in the microwave. You know, the results are much faster. The quality is sometimes better. You know, depends on how good of a cook you are. So a programmer in that case. So yeah, but I agree with you 100%. At this point, the game has all the components that keep people coming back, but there are parts of the game that could be improved slightly, and hopefully those aspects will be part of any type of future upgrade that they've been talking about for the last year or so. And we need to get Jordan back on to get him to provide us with an update of how things are going behind the scenes.
Yeah, I personally am happy with the game. Yeah, I would offer suggestions for tweaks, but it's not going to kill me if they don't do them. And I don't, you know, it costs money to make modifications, and it would cost probably a lot of money to kind of recreate the game in a modern on a modern platform. So I'm not going to hold my breath for that. But you know, I'd love to see some tweaks. You know, the elite system tweaked a little bit. Most people want major changes to the elite system. I don't necessarily want major changes. The firing logic. I haven't seen anybody fired for over 2 years.
No, yeah, that the last time they updated that, they really took it to the extreme because I'm sure it's happening. I just haven't noticed it as much as I used to. You know, you'd see it a little more often than you do now. But yeah, when they changed that to make it easier for coaches to get schools and stuff, I think they kind of skewed it a little bit. You know, there are some things like you're talking about that are not major that in a layman's aspect, you would think should be fairly simple to do. But from a programming aspect on this platform, in this particular language, in this aged piece of equipment or program, it's very difficult. And something as simple as, you know, one of my gripes is if during the season your assistant coach scouts a player, then you should know that player's potential because that's the whole damn purpose of the scout. You know, otherwise you're just throwing money at the wall and not getting anything back in real life. Now, here in this game, it doesn't cost anything for the assistant coach to go out and scout somebody and give you. But how nice would that be to have that in-season scout from that assistant coach actually give you something tangible other than just, yeah, he looks like he's going to be a pretty good player.
Yeah, we could talk about that all day long. I mean, you stop having us all scout the same player for one, and you can have the player turning green for you.
Yeah,
if he likes you,
and they do.
Whatever.
But they do. I don't know if you're aware of that or not. But
I've seen it one time,
okay.
But otherwise, usually, you know, at the levels I've been playing, the players I've been scouting are high interest players, I guess, for other teams. So you know, a scout isn't going to do too much to them. But yeah, you should get credit for that. And I think I mentioned a couple episodes ago that I can't remember what I said. And it's kind of showing how senile I'm getting.
Welcome to the club.
But yeah, I mean, there are some things that would make sense. That you know, it's like, well, if it's doing this, then why isn't it doing that? You know,
right?
And But, like I said, generally speaking, I'm happy with the game. I'm having a good time. I'm competitive. I'm not the best coach in the world. I still haven't beaten Penn State yet. At some point, I'm going to beat Penn State. Okay.
I hear you. Yeah, but you're right. I agree. I love the game. And, when we're looking at this game for the entertainment value, realistically, what else can you do for $10 a month? Let's just assume you've got one team. For $10 a month that you can enjoy even though you're not actively on the computer with the game or on your phone. A prime example, I had an MRI done yesterday. I'm highly claustrophobic, but I had an open MRI machine, do an MRI on my rotator cuff. And as I was laying there to help stem off some of that claustrophobia, and I thought about, my wife and a vacation, rewiring the boat that I'm working on. But then I also spent quite a bit of time thinking, well, maybe if I convert to a wishbone offense and I change my depth chart and I start recruiting wide receivers and converting them to running backs and throwing to them because their hands are going to be better. And it's a short game, so I really don't worry too much about speed. So I could potentially make that. That's the kind of stuff that you get for your $10 a month that you don't necessarily get somewhere else, for $10 a month. I mean, if you spend, I don't know how many hundreds of dollars a month, if you're an avid golfer in green fees, etc., you think about enjoying the game of golf and being out there. But how often are you actually just daydreaming about your golf swing or daydreaming about, positioning the ball better on the green or whatever the case may be? You do, but I wouldn't as much as I do WhatIfSports. And that's a fact in this household. My wife will tell you.
Well, yes. I mean,
So
it's
relatively cheap.
fantasy football. I mean, I enjoy it. Evidently a lot of other people enjoy it. And either you're already good, if you're not thinking about it. And, obviously, if you're one of those guys that can turn a team immediately into a national champion after 2 or 3 seasons without having the team already in place, then maybe you don't need to do a whole lot of thinking about it. But, for me, the incentive is to be as good as I can get and to win games and to beat people on the recruiting trail. And we were talking about recruiting earlier. There are 1,000 different ways to recruit.
Absolutely.
And that's one thing I think about. I say, well, what if and one thing I've been thinking about, and I haven't had the courage to do this. And of course, I played, I think I'm primarily Division 1A. Mm-hmm. What would happen if I spent my entire budget on the first round and just threw in with an entire recruiting class that I wanted to get? And now I'm going to turn some players green. Now, of course, because other players are sending, campus visits and everything else, I'm going to get a healthy chunk of that money back because I'm going to have, recruiting, campus visits that are going to get turned down. But what if I use my entire budget to just overwhelm some recruits?
Yeah, I actually did that. I did that at Division 1, and I can't remember what team. I might have been Arkansas years ago. But I'd been there for several years. The other teams in the conference had been super successful, had a lot of bowl money at the time. Instead of playoff money, it was bowl money. And I had a class of I want to say 6 or 7. A pretty small class in relative terms of things. And I had a substantial amount of money. And like you just said, I picked 7 guys or 6 guys, however many it was. And I said, I'm going to throw all but a couple $1,000s on these guys just so I can sign some decent players if this doesn't work. And I would say that probably, if it was 7, I think I had maybe 5 guys that were green for me at the end of it. but they didn't stay green. Other teams came in, and because they were battling against one recruit where I had already put money in, but every one of them turned into a battle almost. I think 2 of them signed green without ever leaving green. The rest of them were either yellow and eventually turned red. I recall that did happen. But I ended up having to use some of that back pocket money to fill the class out in order to avoid Sims. But I think I only signed like 2 of those guys that I had put, $40,000 or $50,000 on, and they were close. So in terms of things, that money was well spent in effort because they weren't outside of my 360. But here again, I wasn't an elite, and elites came in with their minuscule percentage of improved recruiting opportunity and basically just took anything I wanted. So I haven't done it again for that reason. I took that to be how it would always be if I did it.
Now, see, I think that's where you have to, where luck is involved, number one, and number 2 is being able to anticipate what your opponents are going to do.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if a high part of my recruiting efforts is looking at what my opponents need and trying to predict their behavior. Who is this guy going to go after?
Right.
And if I think he's going to, if my opponent is going to go after that guy, then I want to find another option. And so basically, I mean, in my mind, I keep pushing around. I'm going to, of course, I'll pick out guys that I think are good, that I think that my opponents won't go all in on, and just pray that good potential. Yes, exactly. Thinking about doing it, but I haven't had the courage to do it quite yet. So
if you're going to do it, make sure you do it when you got a ton of money, but only a few recruits to sign, because that's when you're going to get the most bang for your buck, so to speak. But like I said, in my experiment, things didn't quite work out. But you bring up a good point too about the different parts of recruiting, and who you are and who you're recruiting against, and how do those schools compare in their relative history? How do the coaches compare? And that's something I think we'll get into on the next show, is talking about how you can find out what your recruiting opponent needs or is his preferences. Does he pick guys that are below 35 work ethic, or does he never go below 40? And we're going to talk on the next show, if I can remember, about some of those things and the tools that we can use to find those out, because that all plays into the overall recruiting aspect and how you can be successful recruiting. But Joe, thank you for popping in. As always good to have a fellow Redskin on the show. And
thanks for having me.
Anytime, brother, anytime. But that's going to do it for this week. And I think we're going to be on again here in 2 weeks. So summertime's coming up. We may have some rescheduling due to family commitments or what have you. But for the most part, look for us about every 2 weeks or so. And again, I'm your host, Magic. I've enjoyed it. Hopefully you've learned something, and we'll see you next time around.